Welcome to Allie's Attic, where you never know what kind of surprise you'll find in my attic. I'm your host, Allie, and today my surprise is an Exmouth-based indie folk country rock singer-songwriter, Pete Falloon. Hello, Pete.
Hello, Ali. How are you?
I am doing great. How are you?
Very good indeed, thank you.
And now I pronounced that right, Exmouth?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think about half the people around here pronounce it Exmouth very kind of softly, and the other half actually say the word properly, Exmouth. So I
Okay.
think, yeah, either's good.
Okay, we're going with that. All right. Okay. So obviously I've listened to your songs, and Pete, they are gorgeous. They're so beautifully written and produced. It's just amazing. Tell me when you decided that this is what you were going to do.
Well, firstly, thanks very much. It's very kind of you to say so. Yeah, well, in terms of making this album or further back.
Further back, right from the very beginning when you decided, okay, I'm going to be a singer-songwriter.
Oh, wow. Well, I guess that stretches quite a way back. So I've always had some form of music making in my life, but it probably, actually deciding to write songs really in a serious way stretches back to probably somewhere in the late 90s or the early 2000s. I think it's just before the millennium, really. And my brother Matthew was writing songs of his own and playing acoustic gigs around London and the southeast of England and that sort of area. And he knew I played the guitar, and he said, "Why don't you come along? You can kind of play some melodies and things on top." And we started doing that. And after he got me doing that, he then convinced me to sing some backing vocals and taught me to sing harmonies. And yeah, I guess after doing that for a while, I started to think, well, maybe I could write some songs too. So, and that's kind of how it happened, really. So I started sort of, with less songs than him, but we turned from being sort of his act into something we called the Brothers Falloon. And yeah, and we worked mainly as an acoustic duo, and we played a lot of gigs together and recorded a couple of EPs. And at the end of that sort of part of the journey, we then had a small recording deal with an indie label set up by a friend of ours, and we recorded an album which was basically half my songs and half his with a band, and we went on tour and all that sort of thing. So it's really, I've got him to blame for a lot of these things.
Oh, no, you should thank him, not blame him.
Yeah, no, I know, absolutely.
Now, you launched your debut album, Reed in the River, in 2016.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
And go ahead.
Yeah, and again, that's, in many ways, I mean, it's involved him a lot, but in many ways, it's something that is also inspired by what he'd been doing. So after we'd done the Brothers Falloon album, I moved from the southeast of England down to Devon, where I've been ever since. And although I carried on doing some music in some ways, the band couldn't really work in the same way. I was about a 4-hour drive, and so practicing and all that kind of thing is hard, really hard. But eventually he carried on with that band. They made another album, and then they started to make their second record, which ended up being his solo record. And he sent me over some of the demos from that record, and they were just so amazing. I think it was around about before Christmas I heard some of that stuff, and I was up in the room in our bedroom where I am now listening to those early versions, wrapping Christmas presents, and I just sort of sat there. It was one of those, blinding moments that I felt incredibly moved, and I thought, wow, I've kind of missed out on a part of the journey, and I thought, well, I'm going to have to do something for myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you did. I
Thank
mean,
you very
I
much.
mean,
Yeah.
yeah, your songs are beautiful. Now, you've supported Britpop legends like Dodgy, the UK funk heroes, the Blockheads, as well as folk acts like Rory Joseph, Harbottle, and Jonas, and Pete Morton.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, supporting all of the, like, did you sing with them or you just helped promote them or?
It's, well, I guess a little bit of both, but it's a lot of these things are kind of being in the right place at the right time and kind of, with through people I know. But yeah, it's basically, playing opening slots for them, when they're doing live shows, which is amazing because, there's quite a variety of acts there, and um, I guess with some of them there's more similarity with the music, than others. But it's always really interesting trying to take new music to different audiences, and so I've done everything from playing completely acoustic with no amps and no microphone or anything in small folk clubs for some of those gigs, which is an amazing thing to do because people get the whole experience of a song exactly as you would as I would be sitting, in a room at home writing and playing and practicing that. They get that live, and obviously that works well with some of those folk acts with things like the Blockheads. I think that was actually one of the first gigs we played with this material as a band, and that was just an amazing thing to do because the venue was really, really full of people who were really, really up for live music and really wanting to. They were obviously waiting to see the Blockheads, but it was quite nice to see. Yeah, you can put these songs in a very intimate, quiet setting. You can also get a bit louder with drums and bass, and and energize a big audience. So yeah, that's been a really fun thing to do.
That's awesome. Now, you were also nominated for 2017 Best Folk Acoustic Act in the Radio Wigwam International Online Radio Awards, and there was over 1,200 acts that they chose from.
Yeah, I mean, this is it's some of this stuff is just kind of it's kind of amazing, and it's a real privilege. And there's several sides to this. In that, I guess when I set out to do what I wanted to do, I kind of thought, where do I want to be at the end? And I definitely wanted to try and get something onto national radio and online radio and get some hopefully favourable comments in sort of the music press and so on. But of course, when you create something and it's very close to you, you know whether you like it or not, but it's quite hard to know whether anyone else will, kind of
Yeah.
beyond the people you normally take it to. And it's quite a strange thing to do in that it's almost like, I don't know, letting something go after a while because you have to kind of let it set sail. So it was actually really encouraging because generally the response has been amazing, but the radio wigwam thing was a real privilege because it's something I guess we kind of found each other and they've been playing some of my music for a while. But there are some really good online radio stations out there that really help support original acts. And yeah, there were some great acts nominated there. And the great thing with a lot of these shows is, if you want to hear and get into new music across different genres, they're great places to go for that.
Yeah, definitely. So is BBC. And BBC
Yeah.
introducing in Devon said of your live session, beautiful vocals, haunting, heartfelt lyrics, and just exceptionally constructed songs, which is what I said at the beginning, because they are.
Oh, thank you.
Now, your album has also received great reviews and widespread radio play from the UK, USA, Netherlands, and Canada. Yay, Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to read a few of the things that everybody has said about you because like you said, it's something very private and personal to you that you've created, and then you have to kind of let it out into the world, and you don't know what's going to come back.
That's right.
You're getting great, great things coming
No,
back. Folk Radio UK said beautiful folk pop. Charlie Ashcroft, Amazing Radio, said absolutely stunning. Americana UK, seriously folk pop hit potential. R2 Magazine, lovely, delicate and appealing folk pop. A musical delight from start to finish. Delightful, beautiful, superb, sublime, poetic. I can't even say the words. From Fatea Magazine. Now, those are awesome words to attach to a song and a songwriter.
Yeah, I must admit, it's, it's certainly in terms of the response I've got, it's been quite, in that sense, quite overwhelming. I mean, I guess what I will say is I knew, that I guess the more you put into something in some ways, the more you feel vulnerable to those comments coming back. I mean, there definitely has to be a side to you which I'm doing this anyway, and I'm happy with what I've done, and that should be enough. But it's a strange journey beyond that, because then you're looking at kind of, well, you get one review and it's nice, and and so sometimes, like, I think there can be a temptation to kind of try and want to get more and bigger and further and wider. And actually, I think what I've learned well, maybe we'll come towards this in the end, but it's actually is that actually the important thing is finding the people who are into what you do,
Mm-hmm.
and and what your zone is, basically, because it's no good really me attacking BBC Radio 1, because this just isn't for them, really.
Yeah.
So for example, I mean, that's a very broad thing, but yeah, I think that's an important, the key thing was that I put a lot of love and time into what we did, and there were some important things that happened that, if you like, you might see as mistakes or problems or obstacles. That there was a point in the recording of the album where we did 2 studio sessions, and we had the most of the basics of the songs, the vocals, the drums, the bass, the acoustic guitar, and the basic parts. And then there was a point at which really some other stuff needed to be done, and there was a big gap for various reasons, so we needed to kind of tidy up and pull together what we had down on tape and pick and choose and things. And originally my brother Matt had kind of hoped to do that, but all of us were just really pushed for time and things. So firstly, I needed to try and find someone else to sort of do the mixing and things further down the line. But there was also not quite a year, but maybe, I don't know, 6 or 9 months in the middle where we didn't do much as a sort of a recording and a writing team. And as a result, I had what came out of those studio sessions, and I had it on my iPod, and I had it on my phone, and I had it in the car, and I would listen to it when no one else was around, and wait for the music that needed to be added to it to almost emerge from it. So it was kind of crazy, because I'd be driving home from work and listening to this song and thinking, yep, there's this harmony could go there, or a guitar can go there, or we need some mandolins or some percussion or whatever it might have been. And I'd have to be kind of driving home chanting, so I didn't forget, because, I can't turn on a recording device or something in the car. So it was quite an extreme process, but it also, I was very methodical about what I did, and once I captured those things, I tried to write them all down and make sure it was all, in a place where when we went back to the studio, I knew what I was doing. And there was a lot of, I guess I'd describe it much like how you hear people describe what sculptors do, that they have a big block of stone and somehow they can kind of gradually chip away at it, and it was kind of like that, really.
Yeah, I guess it would be. It would be kind of like the same process. Now, Chris Hawkins has given Lay Down in the Morning Light several plays on BBC Radio 6, and this is what he said, and I'm going to agree with him on one thing that was glaringly obvious when I listened to your music. He says, as beautiful as they come, proper craftsmanship, songwriting, Simon and Garfunkel meets the Byrds, capturing daybreak quite perfectly, absolutely gorgeous. It's elegant, it's thoughtful, it's optimistic too. When I listened to Lay Down in the Morning Light, the first people that popped into my head, and that's what always happens whenever I listen to somebody, and I don't know why, but it does, was Simon and Garfunkel. Like right away was
Wow.
Simon and Garfunkel. I was just like, wow. Um, and I love that he captured that too, and also threw the birds in there as well, because every song is different. But you still, like you say, the music is definitely influenced by my love for the natural environment where you live, in Devon, and inspired by living in Devon. And the moors, the coast, the countryside, rivers and skies there are something very, very special. And I guess that's where you're drawing your inspiration from.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, there's several sides to inspiration, and, as you mentioned, one is obviously um, the acts that influence you and the sounds that influence you. But I think in just as deep a way, the experiences, whether they're, dramatic things or everyday things that soak into you. I think that that's an important thing too. And I've always been very much an outdoor person. I mean, I guess I'd say, this music definitely isn't, it doesn't have an urban feel to it really. And yeah, I absolutely love living where I am at the moment. And, exactly as you just said, there are great big wide open spaces like the moors and Dartmoor where, you can see for miles and it's very high up and open. And I guess like some of the probably, the lowland areas of Scotland in some ways, it's quite dramatic. There's a huge range of coastlines from very rocky and rugged to sandy beaches. In between, there are just vast tracts of countryside that are kind of, often not explored. And we live quite close to an open sort of common a woodland area, and I'm often up there walking or running, and I think things like the light, the trees, the countryside, I think they do over time kind of invade
Oh,
your way of being, I think. Yeah.
we had a really weird noise there, but that's okay. Gotta love Skype. That's wonderful. I love drawing any kind of inspiration. I don't sing, I don't write, I don't, but just being in nature inspires you to
Yeah.
feel all kinds of different things. And the way you've just described it, now I want to move there. Now, also said about you is you're similar to the self-styled Paisley Overground movement pioneered by bands such as Co Pilgrim and the Dreaming Spires. And once again, you draw a line through many of the classic folk pop acts of the psychedelic era. And we've already mentioned Simon and Garfunkel, the Byrds, also James Taylor, to modern greats such as REM, the Stone Roses, and also taking influence from other contemporary acts, which you've already touched on. I love this part, such as Canadian Americana band, the Bar Brothers.
Yeah, that actually, so, there's a whole range of things. I guess I'll kind of start backwards just for, just for fun with, with the last bit. But that album, yeah, or their two albums actually became quite important to me, and it's a strange one. So I think it was possibly, we had about 4 recording sessions for the album. With the three of us, Paul Everest, who played drums, my brother Matt, who played bass, amongst many other things, and me. And in Bristol, in the UK, the reason being, I don't know, it's not in the middle of where I live and where they live at all. So, Matt was actually living in Zurich in Switzerland at the time, and Paul was living in London. But for the sake of argument, we decided it was as good a place as any to get away. And so I'd be kind of driving up the motorway and have the radio on or whatever. And I think it was on Radio 2. It was on a live session, and they had the Bar Brothers on there, and they did this amazing acoustic session that I just kind of, it's one of those moments you kind of turn everything right up and concentrate, as much as you can on listening while driving. And and at the end of that, I thought, wow, I've got to go and find something by them. So I went out and bought I might even have bought both of their albums at the time. And then after that, those records became something that I basically would listen to on the way up to the recording sessions, which were even, sort of further away than Bristol, up in Gloucestershire. And I think we had 3 recording sections, because I just found what they'd done with the music and bringing together different styles and instruments. There's things like, as well as the standard band setup and everything, there's things like harp and all this sort of stuff in there, and there's almost sort of swamp blues through to, folky pop and all sorts of stuff, and some of it, to me, is slightly psychedelic. So I found that particularly there's an LP called Sleeping Operator, which I thought was absolutely incredible. So sadly, I guess I had just missed out on their live shows in the UK, which I guess must have been on when we were in the thick of making this music. But yeah, a great band. In terms of the other acts, I guess, yeah. So a lot of the music that will have inspired me comes from childhood, and the classic records you'd find, or we would have found on Mum and Dad's turntable, and stuff like Bridge Over Troubled Water. There's things like Don McLean records, and probably James Taylor, Stevie Wonder. There were some early Beatles records, things like that. And I guess in my teenage, I was quite an indie rock, indie pop kid, really, and the music of the time, a lot of the Manchester and the sort of the sort of psychedelic 60s influence sort of indie dance rock they had around at the time, the Stone Roses and so on, was actually kind of, a lot of it was based, very strongly linked to the Byrds and bands like REM as well. The Byrds, I guess, being British, people tend to think of the Stones and the Beatles as kind of being the cornerstone of of a lot of modern rock and pop music, which is true. But I think it's easy to people don't realise actually the massive amount of influence the Byrds had and continue to have on bands, with that kind of jangly sound and the fantastic harmonies. So kind of the bands like REM and so on led me back through to, if you like, back through to the past in another way.
And beautiful. I mean, I couldn't like, what kind of, like, the best heroes you can choose from. I mean, seriously. Now,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Let's talk about this. Okay, first off, you've been doing this for a while. You started off with your brother, and now you're on your own. If you had any advice to give any recording artist out there that was just starting, what kind of advice would you give them, Pete?
Yeah, I guess some of the things I would say, I guess actually I think apply to life in general. But I think it's really important to try and make the music that is you, and to try and be yourself. I think the hardest part I found in making music and in this journey is, in theory, I could have turned any of these songs into something sounding like, a huge number of styles. You could make it heavier, you could make it, more electronic or whatever else. And I guess at the end of the day, it's essentially just, words and melodies that you can kind of accompany in all sorts of ways. But I think it definitely helps to try and understand what it is, we've just been talking about, what it is that really inspires you in making music. Because I think if you're doing that, I think you will be most inspired in doing something, that you really like and that people will connect with. That doesn't necessarily mean that has to, to me, necessarily has to be totally natural. It's just, whatever. In my case, it is. But I think, I think that's an important side, that actually you do what you're good at, and you try to learn that, and that's definitely helped me. It's not an easy journey at times. I think linked to that, really, I think in terms of making your way in the music industry, getting reviews, getting radio play, even getting live shows, I think it's worth putting effort in to work out where you're best placed to put the music in terms of all of those things, because at the end of the day, if people aren't into what you do, it sounds really obvious, but it's important, because it's all energy, it's all time, and I think if people aren't into what you do, they won't play it or review it or so on. So so I think it's worth spending the time to work those things out. And the same I found is true with live shows. You can play to a really big audience and get some a moderate response, or sell very little in terms of CDs or anything, but you could play to a small audience that are really there listening and engaged with what you do, and you could sell just as many CDs. So it's kind of it's very much about finding your niche, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you have to. Otherwise, it's not going to sound sincere either.
No, which for me, I think in this sort of singer-songwriter genre, I think that is really important. I think that, I guess that links to generally, everything in terms of promotion. I think trying to be as true to yourself, as sincere as possible, as much you as possible is important. Maybe that's not important, in all avenues of music. I guess if you're being more creative, more off the wall, I don't know. But I guess in terms of things like branding and how you pitch yourself, that all still kind of rings true.
Hmm.
I think the other thing I would, they're possibly cliche, but I think I'd also say, keep working at things, and don't give up, and I guess also, at times if you're writing songs or doing something that you don't think is working out, I've found it's worked for me sometimes to have time away from that, or a reason that you end up reflecting on it in a different way. As I was saying earlier about the time I spent adding extra bits to the songs, it was in a sense it was a setback because it delayed the project, but actually for whatever reason it ended up making it much better than I thought it would be. So I think sometimes you can think, actually this isn't going the way I planned, but actually maybe, I guess we're talking about my musical journey, and that's probably the case with most journeys. They don't go necessarily where you planned, but they may well go somewhere better.
Exactly, definitely. Okay, now what two songs are we going to hear from you today?
Yeah, sure. So we're going to hear Canada in the Fall and Lay Down in the Morning Light.
Okay, so now I'm going to...
Yeah.
Canada in the Fall. Blew me away because I'm like, well, he's from the UK. The way you talk about Quebec, the way you talk about Ontario and Ottawa, and obviously you have been there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have. So I'm trying to think when that, probably around 10 years ago now. So I was very lucky. It was a kind of I used to travel a lot with work. I work for the UK Met Office in climate change research, and as a result, we can end up travelling quite a bit for conferences and projects. And on one of those trips, I got sent to Ottawa, and I thought, wow, this is a long way to go, to just go and come back home, because often you end up spending most of it in a building and in a room which looks no different, or
Yeah.
to where you came from. So although the hosts, I have to say, were amazing, and we had an amazing barbecue by the river in his house and so on, but so I took I think a week or 10 days and rented a car and stayed in a hotel, and then moved around and stuff. And it happened to be just the right time of year. I think it was late October, something like that. So, for me, autumn here is very special, but it's obviously nothing like the kind of full colours you get in Canada, and it was kind of mind blowing. And for me, it was also a kind of, I guess, in a sense, a retreat in that I was going through a period of kind of post sort of relationship breakup and stuff, and I
Yeah.
needed some space and time to think,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of the perfect thing to do because it was away from everything. The weather was amazing as well. It was completely like blue skies as well, which with autumn colours is just amazing. And I had a wonderful time. In fact, Canada is very high on the list of places to go abroad with the kids when they're a little bit older. I think it's we won't be there for just a week or 10 days though. I think it will be a
Longer.
whole summer holiday.
Awesome. Well, Ottawa is our nation's capital, so it is beautiful. I've never been, but I've heard it's beautiful. Now, when I saw the name of the song, Canada in the Fall, I was like, "Oh, this is all going to be," and I was like, "Oh no. This is about, running away from a girl and
Yeah.
having to kind of reevaluate," and it's just beautiful. And then lay down in the morning light. Like, oh my God, Pete. Like, I'm a girl. And it is such it's romantic. Like, it's so beautiful. And I know that you are married, right? I believe.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
right. Yes, yeah.
But I've always dreamed from whenever I was little to now of having the other half be able to play a guitar and sing. And if there was any song that I would pick, well, there's a few of them, but definitely that one. It's just gorgeous. I absolutely love it. I am so in love with it.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for writing it and producing it and singing. Like, oh my God. That's one of the things I love about doing what I'm doing now, because I get to do it on my terms. It's my business. And I get to discover people like you who write these poignant songs that are just amazing and they melt you. And I can't even put it in words besides what I've just tried saying. It's just more, I love it.
Wow.
I absolutely love it. Now you can buy your music online pretty much everywhere. Also your website, which is called brothersfalloon.com.
That's right. Yeah.
Now, does your brother also put his music up there along with yours, or is it just strictly you?
Well, the website's kind of sort of a holding page in a sense. So there's kind of links to the social media and stuff like that. I need to do a bit more work on getting on getting it a bit more interesting. But yeah, there is a link to Matthew's page there as well. From which you can find his music as well. And I really recommend that too. It's similar but different, I guess, is all I'll say, and let people kind of discover
Just
that
go
for
from
themselves.
there.
But I mean, and he's also had some great, feedback and great response to what he does, and quite rightly so.
Awesome. Well, at least they get to find both of you.
Yeah,
There was a little bit of breaking up. Just everybody knows that Skype can be really funny, and you're all the way in the UK and I'm in Canada. But you can hear everything. So I'm going to try to obviously edit it, but I'm going to leave it as much as I can because it was a great, great interview, like beautiful interview. Now your website will be up on my website. People can just click on the link. It'll automatically go to yours. And they can discover more of your music, but they can also discover Matthew's music. I want to say thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming on my show and sharing your music with the world. And please don't stop doing that. And keep writing songs like Lay Down in the Morning Light. Because maybe one
yeah.
day I'll find somebody that can, at least play a couple chords and sing. If not, I'm just going to have to keep playing your music.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much as well. I mean, as it happens, I'm kind of beginning to think about what the next project looks and feels like, and that's quite exciting as well. I think that's the other thing in terms of advice to other people. I just say, in a sense, get on and do it and learn through what you're doing, and whether it works out and whether it doesn't. Because having learned an immense amount through, I guess it's like a 3-year journey to have made this album. it's put me in a much better place to understand what I might want next time. So it's yeah.
Awesome. Well, anytime something new comes up and you want to come back on, you're more than welcome. This is not a one-shot deal. I also have a page
I would love
called,
to.
yeah, I also have a page called Allie's Odds and Ends. And how that came about was a couple of my Canadian artists sent me their new singles. And I was like, oh, wow,
Oh yeah.
I get to throw these up on my website and promote them. So I started that page, and that's what it is for. So if you have any new singles that you want to send my way, you just have to send them via email, and I'll throw them up and promote them. Um, and yeah, like, don't stop what you're doing, please, for the love of God. And thank you once again for coming on, Pete.
Bless you. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
So did I, very much. I could listen to you talk all day. And thank you for joining me on Allie's Attic. Keep checking my website because you never know what kind of surprises you'll find in my attic. Cheers.
Cheers.